often on the trail he has insulted almost every group in this country. It is very much unbecoming of the presidency of the United States of America.
The criticism that you hear of Ted Cruz is, why is this what it took for him to really get upset with Donald Trump? Donald Trump could insult basically everybody else in the universe, and Cruz was willing to look the other way. Now it finally gets down to his actual family, and he decides to get annoyed. So, you know, none of this stuff has seemed to fall out on Donald Trump so far. And he's been the I'm rubber, you're glue candidate.
That's right.
And everything sticks to everybody else. At the same time, you do hear qualms, even from some of his supporters, about Trump's vulgarity, about his willingness to I heard from voters in the South, they didn't like him swearing, things like that. So when this gets to the level of sex scandal, I think there are Republicans, the sort of traditional Republicans that we think of, whose sense of propriety is offended, and I think that Cruz is probably hoping that they're going to side with him.
And the risk for Cruz is that, as we've seen all along, is that when you start slinging mud with Donald Trump, you get dirty. I mean, we saw that with Marco Rubio. Of course, it was a different level of attack, but something that Cruz has to worry about. And by talking about there's also a risk of going out and trying to kill this National Enquirer story, which is, of course, unsubstantiated tabloid report. But by talking about it, he elevated it, he injected it into the political discourse. So it's not really clear how this plays out. But I don't think it's necessarily a clear victory for Cruz by bringing it up and trying to find Donald Trump.
One of the things that we've learned about Donald Trump is that he is not going to be a candidate that is going to pivot for the general election and try to look presidential in the traditional sense. There have been two moments over the last month where he really had an opportunity, I think, to sort of stand up and look presidential. The violence in Chicago after one of his rallies, and this moment where this super PAC that's opposing him put out this web ad. They spent like $300 on it, so this was not a major buy. This was a moment where he could have come out and said, families are off limits, I don't want anybody's wife to be gone after. It's very different. And I just think that is going to be Donald Trump. And if these moments, he can try to take the high ground. That moment might be
If you're Hillary Clinton, right, you're looking at all of this and thinking, number one, awesome, this is great for me. And number two, oh my God, what is going to happen in the general election, right? If she ends up being the nominee, you can 100% bet now, if she wasn't already counting it already, on everything that ever happened to Bill Clinton coming back up again in the form of a bazillion ads, and whether or not Donald Trump has anything directly to do with them, him putting his thumb on the scale.
It does show Trump's problem with women voters, too. I mean, the CNN poll last week had 74% of registered women voters view him negatively. That's a huge problem for him in a general election, especially against Hillary Clinton.
And let's look at that, because this has become now a point of discussion, especially after he retweeted the unflattering photo of Heidi Cruz. People say this is Trump's problem with women. There are the numbers Manu just talked about right there. With female registered voters across the board, 73% have an unfavorable opinion. And even 4 in 10, 39% Republican women have an unfavorable view of Donald Trump. So it is a problem. Now, Trump tweeted just yesterday that this is our fault. He tweeted, the media is so after me on women. Wow, this is a tough business. Nobody has more respect for women than Donald Trump. That may well be the case now. Mr. Trump is entitled to state his opinion, but one of the problems for Mr. Trump is, now he says this is just entertainment when he was not a candidate for president. But listen here, please be patient, this takes a little bit. He has a history of saying things that are pretty damn offensive.
A person who's flat-chested is very hard to be a 10, okay?
We could say politically correct that the look doesn't matter, but the look obviously matters. Like you wouldn't have your job if you weren't beautiful.
Go out with Marsha Cross, or would you turn gay, Howard?
Excuse me, you dropped to your knees.
Yes.
Begged to do that.
It must be a pretty picture you dropped into
John
your
and
knees.
Dennis thought I should be.
We're all a little chubby, but Rosie's just worse than most of us. But it's not the chubbiness. Rosie is a very unattractive person.
And you're going to have more kids?
I think so, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, sure. I will.
What do you need that headache for?
Because I like kids. I mean, I won't do anything to take care of them. I'll supply the funds, and she'll take care of the kids.
You could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever.
That's the candidate in his own words. And again, a lot of that predates the campaign, so he can explain it away if he wants, saying I was on Howard Stern, I was just entertaining. But now he's running for president, and you are accountable, are you not, for everything you have said and done?
Well, sure. I mean, look, it's the women voters who decide how to take those remarks, right? And he can say, like, oh, why are you taking this so personally? This should be about, the things I'm proposing to do for the country, not my analysis of people's appearance. And there may be some people who sympathize with that.
But again, I think the polling you cited is pretty clear that women have chosen to take this personally. Women have chosen to take this as an attack on women broadly, not on a few individual women. And I think to the point about Hillary Clinton, she has not gotten a lot of mileage so far in this campaign out of being a woman candidate. She has tried. She talks about it so much more than in 2008 when she was trying to run as like Margaret Thatcher, basically. She's talked a lot about being a path-breaking candidate and being the first woman president. And in the Democratic primary, women voters haven't seemed to respond to that very strongly, particularly young women voters.
Pick up or go online and read this morning's New York Times. Two of the best in the business, our friend Maggie Haberman here and David Sanger, the international affairs correspondent, have this interview, 100 minutes with Donald Trump. 2 interviews conducted program, perhaps, a number of provocative things about his views on foreign policy, and some of them very significant changes. He says, for example, that if Japan and South Korea aren't willing to put up more resources, help pay for the defense alliance, we'll just bring American troops home. They can have their own nuclear weapons. He says if Saudi Arabia isn't nicer to the United States, isn't willing to do more to help combat ISIS in the region, we could pull out and leave them alone and stop buying oil from them and the like. He says this also, and as a guy who spent a lot of time on the Pat Buchanan bus back in the day, he says, I'm not isolationist. I'm not isolationist. I am America first. We will not be ripped off. We're going to be friendly with everybody, but we're not going to be taken advantage of by anybody. America first was a big slogan of Pat Buchanan back in the 1996 presidential campaign. There's a lot to digest if you read this article, and part of it is the appeal of Trump, that he does not fit anybody's orthodoxy. A lot of people read the article and say, whoa, 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 there's like 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 mainstays in U.S. foreign policy that you're just willing to toss out the window.
Well, and I think the reason Trump continues to do well is that there are a lot of people in this country who feel like the collective expertise of whatever establishment you want to talk about, the foreign policy establishment, the governing establishment, all of the people with all of the degrees from all of the right places, hasn't worked. That, you know, the best and the brightest in the Obama administration have applied their collective expertise to these problems, and look what's happening. A lot of people feel like the world is on fire. And that's why Donald Trump, I think, has continued to benefit from these international crises. Like you say, he's strong, he's forceful, his messages are very simple, even if they go against a lot of the sort of consensus of how how the U.S. should conduct itself in the world. There's an appealing simplicity and strength to them. And, you know, it's the politics of fear. And I know a lot of Democrats who really worry that if there is a big terrorist attack, particularly on our soil, shortly before the general election, that people will flock to Trump's message because he offers the comfort of security and someone to blame.
Thanks very much for joining us. I want to talk to you about the terror attack in Brussels. If you were president of the United States, what steps would you take right now to prevent these kinds of attacks from happening here in the United States?
Well, I'd immediately strengthen our borders, as I've been talking about for a long period of time, and I would be very, very strong on visas, and I'd be very, very probably end a lot of them. And I'd be very strong, and especially coming from certain parts of the world, which, as you know, I've spoken about, and I've been criticized in some circles for, and I've been praised in other circles for. But this is a problem. Radical Islamic terrorism is a major problem, and we have a president that won't even mention the term, won't mention the words, and he's making a terrible mistake. This is radical Islamic terrorism.
Would you continue to support at least a temporary ban on all Muslims coming into the United States?
Well, you have no choice, and you're going to make certain exceptions, and you're going to make exceptions on heads of state and certain people, and I'm not saying you don't do that, but we have a real problem, and people don't have any idea what's going on. We have a government that's impotent. We have a government that doesn't get it, but we have a real problem, Wolf, and we have a government that doesn't understand what's happening.
You're from New York City, where there are at least three major airports, the most trafficked train station in the country. Should there be added layers? I know security is always high in New York, especially after 9/11, but should there be added levels of security put in place right now? For example, at airport baggage claim centers, train stations, other places.
Yes, there should. And, you know, we have a mayor who's doing a terrible job, and everybody talks about it. He's doing a terrible job in so many ways, de Blasio. He's a disaster as a mayor and probably will be challenged. I can't imagine that he gets away with this, but he knocked out surveillance and so many other things. You know, we had the finest surveillance of of the whole radical Islam situation that there is, they say, in the world, the New York City Police Department, which is an amazing department. And he knocked it out. He took it down, and he knocked it out. And that was a terrible mistake.
What do you think if you do have this temporary ban, though, on Muslims coming into the United States? Don't you understand, at least a lot of the law enforcement authorities say, you need the cooperation of Muslims to find the radical Muslims, the jihadists, and without their cooperation, it could potentially get a whole lot worse.
Well, let me tell you a little secret. So the man that was caught the other day, this lowlife that was caught the other day, he was guarded by people that knew, the community knew he was there. Everybody knew he was there. He was seen shopping in grocery stores, and they have pictures of him shopping in grocery stores. His community knew he was there. There are probably many, many people that knew him, and they never turned him in. And that's part of the problem. They don't turn him in. Maybe they're going by Sharia law, which is what they want to start off with. But we have a real problem, Wolf, and unless we solve the problem, we can't continue to be the stupid people. You look at what's going on in Germany. You look at what's going on even in a part of Sweden, where they're having problems like they never thought possible. Sweden never had problems like this, where a group came in and now all of a sudden they have a section. So we can be nice about it, and we can be politically correct about it, but we're being fools, okay? We're being absolute fools. There's something going on, and unless we get to the bottom of it, we're going to have to be very vigilant. We're going to have to be very strong, or we're not going to have a country left either. You look at what's going on in Brussels. You know, Brussels was one of the most beautiful places, okay? And everybody talked about it, and nobody talks about Brussels anymore. In fact, on a lot of the news reports, I guess a few months ago, I talked about how bad Brussels were, and then 6, 7 months ago, I talked about how bad Brussels was, and I got a little heat over it, and now they're all saying Trump was right. Brussels is a disaster. They have areas of Brussels the police won't even go into those areas. They're so dangerous and so radicalized. I'm just saying, we have to be smart and we have to be vigilant.
If you were president, Mr. Trump, what would you do? How would you question Salah Abdeslam, one of the ringleaders of the Paris attacks, who was arrested the other day in Brussels?
Well, that's the man I'm talking about, and he was arrested in an area that everybody knew he was there, but they didn't turn him in. The Muslim community did not turn him in, and they should have turned him in. And right now we have a lot of people, and a lot of people think he may have led this attack. He may have been the one that did the attack, or it was done in retribution. And what I would do is I think we have to change our law on the waterboarding thing, where they could chop off heads, and they can drown people in cages, in heavy steel cages, and we can't waterboard. So we have to change our laws, and we have to be able to fight at least on an almost equal basis. We have laws that we have to obey in terms of torture. They have no laws whatsoever that they have to obey.
So would you start torturing him right away, or would you see if he would cooperate and share information? Because Belgian police say he has been talking.
Well, he may be talking, but he'll talk a lot faster with the torture. If he would have talked, you might not have had to blow up all these people dead and all these people horribly wounded, because he probably knew about it. I would be willing to bet that he knew about this bombing that took place today. So we have to be smart. I mean, it's hard to believe. We can't waterboard, which is nothing's nice about it, but it's your minimal form of torture. We can't waterboard, and they can chop off heads.
Because they argue, the people who passed the law say waterboarding is torture. And you say you would even go further than waterboarding? Is that right?
Absolutely.
How far would you go?
Well, I'd go further. I'd listen to the military people, but I'd go further.
The military people don't want. The military people say they oppose torture.
I
disagree. It's not part of the U.S. Military Code of Conduct.
I don't believe they do. I don't believe it. I think they're told to say that politically. I think that they believe in it 100%. You talk to General Patton from years ago. You talk to General Douglas MacArthur. I will guarantee you, these were real generals, and I guarantee you they would be laughing. Well, right now they're crying, and right now they're spinning in their graves as they watch this stupidity go on.
Because I just wanted to interrupt, Mr. Trump. I just want to point out it was the CIA who was engaged in the waterboarding after 9/11. The U.S. military deliberately said they didn't want to have any part of the waterboarding because it wasn't part of their military code of conduct. That's why it was left to civilians working at the CIA with the authorization of the Justice Department, of course, and the Bush administration.
Well, with the authorization, it is probably a political decision, not a real decision. It wasn't probably, in my opinion, it wasn't a military decision. It was a political decision, and it continues to be a political decision. And the problem that we have, Wolf, it's a very big problem. We're fighting by different sets of rules. They're fighting with no rules, no regulations, no anything. They can blow people up in shopping centers. They can have bombs that are so vicious with the nails and the glass and all of the things come spewing out, blinding and destroying people and killing people, and yet we have rules and regulations. We can't waterboard because it's a little bit on the tough side.
Well, they
Look,
say
we have to get smart, Wolf.
They point out that it's a violation of international law to engage in torture, and the U.S. has signed on to these various international treaties banning torture.
Well, I would say that the eggheads that came up with this international law should turn on their television and watch CNN right now, because I'm looking at scenes on CNN right now as I'm speaking to you that are absolutely atrocious. And I would be willing to bet, when I'm seeing all the bodies laying all over the floor, including young, beautiful children laying dead on the floor, I would say if they watch that, maybe, just maybe, they'll approve waterboarding and other things.
As you know, Ted Cruz suggested today the U.S. should step up its involvement going into Muslim neighborhoods, as he described it, looking for potential terrorists. Is that something you would support?
Yes, I would. I think that's a good idea.
I'm talking about Muslim neighborhoods in the United States, for example.
Yeah, I would support that, yes, 100%.
But how would you do that? How do you find out where Muslim neighborhoods are?
You do it. You do it. Yeah, let me tell you, I bet you the local police know much more than what's going on than anybody would understand. I would be willing to bet that the local police, and that I know it's true with the gangs. I know that if the police were given their hand, they would stop the gang problems in Chicago and various other places. They know the gang members. They know everything. They know things that are going on, and local police know plenty about the Muslims too. But the police have been so hurt and so left out and so discouraged by what's happening, where they lose their jobs, they lose their pensions, they lose everything, that we have a very soft country. We have a very, in many ways, not in certain countries, but in many countries, we have a very soft world. And it's going to get a lot tougher. You watch, because people can't take this. These acts, these horrible, violent acts. Now, the man that was caught, I'm sure knew about this, and I'm sure if they were strong and strong like Nike strong, I'm sure he would have given them up before this act happened. He knew about this act. This act was an act of retribution because they caught him. A lot of people are saying that. And it probably was. And he probably knew about it. Maybe he planned it. But, he's probably right now sitting there with lawyers surrounding him saying, you don't have to talk, don't worry about it. The trial will start in 10 years. In 10 years, everybody will forget.
Mr. Trump, what do you say to the millions of Muslim Americans who are very patriotic, loyal Americans, many of whom have sons and daughters who serve in the U.S. military, who feel they would be discriminated against if these policies went forward?
I say we have a problem. We have a radical Islamic terrorism problem. That's what I say. I have to say that. We have a problem like we've never had before. This is a problem that has gone on. General Pershing had the problem in 1919 in the Philippines with radical Islamic terrorism. And he handled it a certain way. I think you probably know that story. It's a very gruesome story. But you know what? The problem didn't exist for 48 years after that happened. So we have to be a lot tougher than we are. Right now, they look at us as weak, soft, stupid people. Look at the scene on CNN right now, all the bodies all over the floor, and we're worried about waterboarding.
Mr. Trump, I know you got to go, but thanks very much for joining us. We'll continue these conversations down the road.
I think we have to change our law on the waterboarding thing, where they can chop off heads and they can drown people in cages and we can't waterboard. So we have to change our laws, and we have to be able to fight at least on an almost equal basis. We have laws that we have to obey in terms of torture. They have no laws whatsoever that they have.
So would you start torturing him right away, or would you see if he would cooperate and share information? Because Belgium
She certainly doesn't know what I'm going to be saying today at 5 o'clock.
She says you don't have steady hands.
And far steadier than us. Look where she got us. Look at Libya. Look at the migration. Look at Benghazi. Here's a woman that's talk. She's just writing. She's just reading it off a teleprompter. She's just all she does. Believe me, they write that for her. Look at the job. Probably in history, although I think John Kerry may even be worse. I'm not sure after the Iran deal. But look at what she's done.
He's referring to your comment that you wanted to be neutral as a negotiator to try to achieve an Israeli-Palestinian peace.
I would love to be neutral if it's possible. It's probably not possible because there's so much hatred. There's so much going on. I am very pro-Israel. I've always been pro-Israel. I have many awards from Israel, many awards. I've contributed a lot of money to Israel. There's nobody more pro-Israel than I am. We have to protect Israel. Israel is so important to us.
There are small little metal discs that are going to be directly touching your scalp. It's going to be sampling the electrical activity.
This is your brain.